The land was tired. The kind of tired that only comes after centuries of wind and sun and silence. Evening had fallen across the wild west plains like a slow-moving shadow, painting everything in shades of gold and sorrow. The grass leaned eastward, whispering secrets to the coming night. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a lone hawk circled, silent, patient, watching the world hold its breath. And down in that breathless valley lived Elias Boone, a farmer of few words and fewer smiles. His land was wide, but his life was small. Each morning, he rose before the light touched the hills, boiled his coffee in a tin pot gone black with years, and walked the same narrow path from the porch to the barn, from the barn to the fields, from the fields back to the house, as though he feared wandering anywhere memory might find him. He used to hum once, but not anymore. Since Mara had gone, his voice had quieted into the soil. The land hadn't heard music since. The house stood weary at the edge of a wheat field, boards grayed by dust, a porch sagging like a tired back. The air smelled of dry grain, old wood, and a loneliness so familiar it had stopped feeling strange. When the sun began its slow descent that day, Elias leaned his weight against the fence post and watched the fields glow. His hands were cracked, his nails darkened with earth. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. He didn't answer. He hadn't answered much of anything in years. But then it came, a sound that didn't belong to the desert. A cry, faint at first, barely a whimper against the wind. It rose and fell like the trembling breath of something forgotten. He frowned, tipping his hat back, listening harder. Again, that small sound, thin and pleading, drifting from the far edge of the wheat field. Elias's heart, the one that had lain still for so long, gave a reluctant stir. He took the lantern from its hook and set out, boots dragging through the brittle stalks. The light swung slow, carving small circles of gold against the gathering dusk. The cry came again, sharper now, desperate. He followed, past the old oak stump, past the broken fence, until at the edge of his land, near the ditch where the field gave way to wild grass, he found it. A dog, thin as famine, trembling, its fur tangled and matted with dust. Its ribs moved like piano keys beneath skin. One paw bled, caught in barbed wire half buried in the soil. For a long time, Elias just stood there, watching. He could have turned back. It would have been easy, just another lost creature in a world full of them. But there was something in that animal's eyes, something painfully human. A plea, a question, maybe even a memory. The dog tried to stand but collapsed, whimpering softly. Elias knelt, sighing through his teeth, and with hands that shook more than he wanted, began unwinding the wire. The metal bit into his palms. The rust left streaks of red. There, easy now, he muttered under his breath, his voice rough from disuse. When the paw came free, the dog didn't run. It just stared at him, eyes wide, glassy, full of a kind of gratitude that wordless things often hold better than people. He should have walked away. He didn't. Instead, he lifted the dog, lighter than a sack of feed, into his arms. The creature's heart beat fast against his chest. The walk back felt long. The sky turned violet, the first stars peeking out like curious eyes. Somewhere a far-off thunder rolled, but the air stayed dry, the kind of dry that cracks lips and memories alike. When Elias reached the porch, he hesitated again. The dog whimpered faintly. His resolve broke. He pushed open the door with his shoulder. Inside, the house was dim, quiet except for the ticking of the old wall clock and the lonely sigh of the wind against the window. He set the dog down near the hearth, lit a small fire, and fetched a torn quilt from the rocker. "Don't get used to it," he muttered, more to himself than the creature. But the dog looked up at him with those same molten eyes, and he knew he was already lying. He warmed water on the stove, cleaned the wound, and tore a strip from his sleeve to wrap it. The dog didn't flinch, didn't growl, just watched, tail twitching faintly. When he poured a little broth into a bowl, the dog drank like it hadn't known mercy in a long, long while. Elias leaned back, arms crossed, watching the fire flicker against the dog's fur. For the first time in years, the house didn't sound hollow. It sounded like breathing. He slept uneasy that night, The faint sound of soft paws pacing the floorboards mixing with dreams he hadn't dared dream since Mara was alive. Dreams of laughter, of warmth, of something like peace. Morning came pale and slow. The dog was still there, curled by the ashes, eyes blinking at the light. Elias felt the smallest tug in his chest, a thread of connection he didn't ask for. He tried to ignore it, went about his chores, pretending the animal wasn't following. But each step he took, the sound of paws followed, quiet, insistent. By noon, he gave up pretending. "Well," he said gruffly, tipping his hat toward the sky. "Looks like I got company." The dog wagged its tail, once, twice, like a faint echo of joy. That afternoon, Elias fixed the gate, mended the chicken coop, and for the first time in years, spoke aloud while working. Not to a person, to the dog. He didn't expect answers. He didn't need them. The silence between man and beast carried its own kind of language, slow, forgiving, true. As days stretched into a week, the dog grew stronger. Its coat regained some shine, its gait steadied. It followed Elias everywhere, to the barn, to the creek, even to Mara's grave beneath the willow tree. Elias didn't speak much there, but the dog sat beside him, quiet and still, as though it understood that some silences were sacred. It was on the 7th evening, as the horizon blazed orange, that he found a name for it. He stood on the porch, watching the dog chase the last light of the day, and something old stirred in his memory. His wife's laughter, echoing through time. "If you ever get another one, call him Scout. He'll find his way home, no matter what." Elias swallowed hard, staring at the creature darting through tall grass. "Scout," he whispered. The dog turned, ears perking up, tail wagging like it knew, as if it had been waiting to hear that name all along. From that night on, something changed in the house. The floorboards didn't creak the same. The walls didn't echo as they used to. Mornings came with soft barks and warm eyes. Evenings ended with shared silence by the fire. The air smelled less of dust, more of life. Sometimes Elias caught himself humming again, low, almost afraid, but there it was, music finding its way back into the man's chest. And every night, before sleep, he'd glance at the old photograph on the mantel, him and Mara smiling in the sun, and wonder if she'd sent this creature his way. Because sometimes the things we think we find are the ones that were sent to find us. And so the farmer and the dog lived the days that followed in quiet understanding, one healing from loss, the other from abandonment. Neither spoke a word. Neither needed to. In the heart of the Wild West, under skies endless and merciful, two lonely souls had finally met, and something small but unshakable had begun to grow. Morning came soft and golden, spilling through the warped window panes like honey over wood. The world smelled of dew and sun-warmed wheat. Somewhere, a meadowlark was singing, its voice carrying through the stillness. Elias Boone sat at his kitchen table, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee. Across from him, on the floor, Scout lay stretched out, eyes half closed, tail flicking in lazy contentment. It had been 3 weeks since the night of the cry in the dust. 3 weeks since Elias had allowed another living thing to sit by his fire. He didn't say it aloud, but the silence of the house had changed. It wasn't hollow anymore. It listened. It breathed. He reached down, idly scratching behind Scout's ear. "You eat more than I do," he murmured. Scout's tail thumped in reply. Outside, the land shimmered under the mid-morning sun. The wind carried the smell of rain that hadn't come yet, a promise that hung in the air like an unfinished sentence. Elias rose, stretched his back, and stepped onto the porch. He was surprised to see a familiar figure riding toward him, a horse kicking up small clouds of dust along the trail. Clara May. She was a widow from 2 farms over, a woman with kind eyes and a habit of showing up with pie whenever she felt someone had been too quiet for too long. "Morning, Elias," she called as she swung down from her horse. Her voice carried warmth, the kind that could coax a smile from stone. Elias nodded, a rare curve forming at the corner of his mouth. "Morning, Clara." She handed him a small basket, covered with a blue cloth. "Apple this time," she said, brushing her hands on her skirt. "And don't you tell me you ain't hungry." You look thinner than the fence posts." He chuckled softly, a sound like dry leaves rustling. "I'll take your word for it." Her gaze dropped to the dog lying on the porch steps. "Well now," she said with a smile. "And who's this handsome fella?" "Named Scout," Elias replied. "Found him tangled in wire by the south field." Clara knelt, patting her knee. "He's a good one. Look at those eyes. He's seen more of this world than most men." Elias nodded quietly. "He's got spirit, that's sure." Clara stood, brushing dust from her palms. "It's good to see life back on this farm, Elias. Been a long time since it felt lived in." Her words hung in the air. She didn't mean them to hurt, but they did, softly like rain on an old wound. He looked out across the fields, where the wheat swayed slow and easy. "Yeah," he said at last. "Been a long time." That afternoon, the sky darkened a little. Not storm dark, just thoughtful. The kind of sky that made the land feel like it was remembering something. Elias worked near the river, fixing a broken fence post. Scout roamed nearby, nose low to the ground, tail flicking in curiosity. But then something changed. Scout stopped, head tilted, ears sharp. He let out a low whine and began to trot, then run down the riverbank. "Scout," Elias called, setting down his hammer. "Hey, come back here." But the dog didn't listen. He darted through the tall grass, barking once, twice, then vanished beyond the bend. Elias sighed, muttered something under his breath, and followed. His boots squelched through the soft earth by the water. When he finally caught sight of Scout, the dog was digging furiously near the roots of a willow tree, a place Elias knew too well. He slowed his steps. The air thickened. The willow was where he'd buried Mara's keepsakes, the locket, the ring, the folded handkerchief with her initials. He hadn't been there since the funeral. Couldn't bear it. But Scout was there now, digging with quiet desperation, whining softly as if sensing something buried deeper than earth. "Hey," Elias said gently, kneeling beside him. "That's enough now." Scout froze, then looked up, mud on his muzzle, eyes bright and full of meaning. He stepped back and nudged the dirt with his paw. Elias brushed away the loose soil with trembling fingers, and there, half buried, lay a small silver locket. For a long moment, he couldn't breathe. He knew that locket. He'd thought it lost forever, swept away in the river the night Mara died. He picked it up slowly, wiped the dirt away. The hinge creaked open with a soft metallic sigh. Inside, a photograph, faded but still clear enough to see two smiling faces. His arm around Mara, her eyes alive with light. And on the other side, a tiny engraving, "Love finds its way home." His throat closed. The world seemed to hush. Even the river stopped speaking for a heartbeat. He sat back on his heels, staring at the sky that had turned the color of steel. Scout rested his head against Elias's knee, whining softly, as if apologizing for what he'd unearthed. Elias whispered, his voice breaking, "How'd you find this, boy?" Scout only looked up, his amber eyes shimmering like the locket itself, full of something older than time. That night, the rain finally came. Soft at first, then steady, a rhythm on the roof that felt like forgiveness. Elias sat by the fire, the locket turning slowly in his hands. Scout slept nearby, chest rising and falling with quiet trust. For the first time in years, Elias allowed himself to remember everything. Not just the loss, but the laughter, the mornings filled with light, the sound of Mara's voice calling him in for supper. He whispered to the photograph, his words barely reaching the air. Maybe love don't die. Maybe it just changes shape. The fire cracked, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. Scout stirred, opened his eyes, and rested his head on Elias's boot. Outside, thunder rolled like the slow beating of a giant heart. By morning, the world smelled fresh and clean, washed new. The fields glistened, and a mist clung low to the ground like memory, refusing to leave. Elias hitched up the wagon to head into town for supplies. Scout trotted beside him, tail high, spirit bright. Halfway down the dirt road, they met a rider, tall, with a black coat and a hat pulled low. His horse was restless, kicking dust into the wind. The man slowed as he approached, his voice sharp as flint. "Morning," You the farmer up yonder? Elias nodded warily. That's me. The man's eyes flicked to Scout. A grin crept across his face, one that didn't reach his eyes. Fine dog you got there. Elias said nothing. Looks familiar, the man went on. I one just like him. Smart beast. Worked the mines, could sniff out gold veins better than any man. Got lost in a cave in months back. Figured he was dead till I saw him just now. Elias's grip tightened on the reins. He's mine now. The man leaned forward in his saddle, voice dropping low. He ain't yours, farmer. He's property. Scout pressed closer to Elias's leg, trembling slightly. Elias's voice stayed calm, but there was steel in it. You leave him be. The stranger smirked. You'll regret keeping what ain't yours. Then he turned his horse and rode off into the haze, the sound of hooves fading into the hills like a threat carried by wind. Elias watched him go, jaw set, heart uneasy. He looked down at Scout. The dog was shaking, eyes wide and fearful. Don't worry, Elias murmured. He won't have you. Scout's tail moved faintly, not wagging, just acknowledging. That night, the moon rose heavy and pale over the prairie. Elias sat on the porch with the locket in his palm, the silver glinting in the moonlight. Scout lay at his feet, eyes fixed on the dark horizon. For a while, neither moved. The night was still, so still it almost felt sacred. Elias whispered, as though to the stars, Funny how you came here, boy. Like you were meant to. Scout lifted his head and looked at him. Really looked, and something deep inside Elias shifted. It wasn't just a dog he'd found. It was a bridge between what he'd lost and what he still had left to live for. He reached down, resting his calloused hand gently on Scout's head. Guess we're both survivors, huh? The dog sighed, closing his eyes, and the two of them sat there, man and beast, past and present, breathing in the quiet mercy of the wild west night. The days passed like long sighs over the land. The wheat bent low under wind, whispering secrets only the plains could keep. Elias had known unease before, drought, debt, loneliness, but this was different. This fear had a name now, and a face that smiled without warmth. The stranger. He'd come once like a shadow, and shadows never leave without taking something. Scout stayed close these days, following Elias from barn to field, his dark eyes scanning the tree line as if he knew danger by scent alone. Nights were quiet, too quiet, the kind that make you listen for what isn't there. Elias would sit by the fire, polishing his old rifle not out of intent, but out of memory. He'd been a soldier once, before the land called him home. He knew what silence before violence felt like. One evening, just as the sun began to sink, painting the world in gold and rust, a knock came on the door. Slow, measured. Elias opened it to find Clara May standing there, her face pale, her shawl caught in the wind. Elias, she whispered, there's trouble down in town. He stepped aside, letting her in. Scout padded between them, tail still, eyes alert. What kind of trouble? Man came in a skin about a farmer up this way. Said his dog ran off. Folks said they seen Scout with you. He offered money for anyone who'd tell him where you live. Elias's jaw set. You got a name? She shook her head. No, just eyes that don't blink right. The fire crackled behind them. Outside, the light faded from gold to gray. Elias looked down at Scout, who met his gaze, steady, unafraid, ready. Reckon he'll come tonight, Elias said softly. Clara's hand trembled as she reached for his arm. Elias, you can't face a man like that alone. I ain't alone. His voice was low, quiet as a prayer. That night, the plains slept uneasy. The sky hung heavy with thunder that hadn't yet found the courage to fall. Elias didn't sleep. He sat on the porch, rifle resting across his knees, Scout lying close by. Fireflies blinked in the tall grass, tiny lanterns trying to hold back the dark. Hours passed. The air grew thick. Then hooves. Slow, deliberate. Out of the dark, the stranger appeared, coat black as pitch, hat low over his brow. He stopped at the gate, the horse snorting mist into the cold night air. Well, the man said, voice carrying like gravel over still water, you're a stubborn one. Elias didn't rise. He ain't yours. The stranger dismounted, boots crunching on the dirt. You don't understand, farmer. That dog's worth more than you'll see in a lifetime. Then maybe that's what makes him priceless. The man chuckled. You think he loves you? He's a tool. Always was. He'll come when I call. He whistled, sharp, commanding. Scout's ears flicked, body tense, torn by instinct and memory. For a moment, Elias saw the battle behind those eyes. Loyalty against fear, past against present. The man whistled again, louder this time. Come on, boy. Don't make me take you. Scout took one slow step forward, then another, trembling. Elias's voice came soft, almost breaking. Scout! The dog froze. Elias laid the rifle aside and knelt in the dust, eyes never leaving him. You came to me when you were lost. I ain't ever called you mine. But if you want to stay, you stay. If you want to go, you go. No command. No leash. Just truth. Scout looked between them, one man who owned him and one who loved him. The choice stretched out between them like a canyon. Then, like thunder cracking open the night, Scout turned, not toward the stranger, but toward Elias, teeth bared, standing between his master and his friend. The stranger cursed, drawing his pistol. Elias moved before thought, the rifle snapping to his shoulder. A warning shot split the air, shattering the stillness. The man staggered back, firing wild. Scout lunged, knocking the gun from his hand, the sound of snarling and struggle rolling through the night. Scout! Elias shouted. The man kicked the dog hard, sending him sprawling into the dirt. Then he reached for the fallen pistol. Elias fired again, a single, ringing shot that echoed across the valley. Silence. The stranger fell to his knees, the gun tumbling from his grip. Not dead. The shot had struck the ground near him, a warning carved in thunder. Elias walked forward slowly, rifle still raised. You'll leave now. You'll ride west, and you won't come back. This dog don't belong to no man like you. The stranger's face twisted with rage and disbelief. You'll regret this. Already do, Elias said quietly. The man stumbled to his horse, clutching his arm, and rode off into the dark, swallowed by distance and dust. The world fell silent again. Only the wind moved, soft, trembling, tired. Elias dropped to his knees beside Scout. Blood matted the dog's fur where the kick had struck. Hey, boy, he whispered. Stay with me. Scout whimpered, licking Elias's hand weakly. His eyes, even in pain, were steady, clear, full of trust. Clara ran from the house, lantern swinging, light cutting through the gloom. Elias, she cried. Is he? He's hurt, Elias said. But he's here. They carried him inside, laid him by the fire. Clara fetched warm water and rags, her hands trembling but sure. Elias cleaned the wound, murmuring nonsense, old prayers, maybe, or memories. When it was done, Scout rested his head on Elias's boot, breathing slow, the flicker of the flames dancing in his eyes. Outside, the thunder finally broke. Rain fell in silver sheets, washing the dust from the land, from the porch, from the world. Elias sat beside him all night, refusing sleep. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes he just listened to the rain. Guess you showed him, he murmured. Guess you showed me, too. The dog's chest rose and fell, slow and steady. By dawn, the storm had passed. The first light broke through clouds and spilled across the floor like grace. Scout stirred, lifted his head, tail wagging weakly. Elias laughed then. The sound cracked and real, like a rusty gate finally swinging open. You're tougher than the both of us, he said. Outside, the earth steamed, alive again. The field shone. The sky was a clean, endless blue. For the first time in a long while, Elias Boone felt the weight of the past ease from his shoulders. He looked at the locket hanging by the window, light catching its silver curve, and he thought of Mara's words, "Love finds its way home." Maybe it already had. He looked down at Scout, who had drifted back to sleep by the fire. "Rest now," he whispered. "You earned it." The wind outside carried the smell of rain and renewal. Somewhere, far away, a new day began. And inside that quiet farmhouse, two souls, one man, one dog, dreamed of peace they'd both almost forgotten could exist. The morning after the storm was the kind that made even silence sound holy. The world glistened, every blade of grass crowned in dew, every fence post-dark with rain. The air felt new, washed clean of its ghosts. Elias Boone stepped out onto his porch, the boards damp beneath his boots. Scout followed close, his limp faint but present, a reminder of what had been fought for and what had been kept. The sky stretched endless, a river of blue that went on and on. The wind that moved through the wheat was soft now, not whispering warnings, but blessings. Days turned gentle again. The stranger never returned. The sheriff passed through once, found a bullet buried in the road, asked questions that Elias didn't answer. Sometimes silence tells the truest story. The farm began to breathe again. New shoots came up in the garden, tender and green. Chickens clucked lazily in the yard. And every evening, when the sun began to fold itself into the hills, Elias and Scout would walk down to the river where the willow trees grew, the same place the past had been buried and found again. There, he'd sit in the grass while Scout lay beside him, head on his lap. The river spoke in soft ripples, the way old friends speak when words are no longer needed. He carried the locket with him now, not as grief, but as gratitude. Sometimes he'd open it, look at Mara's face, and smile instead of ache. "Guess you sent him," he'd whisper. "Guess you knew I wasn't done living yet." Scout would nudge his hand, and Elias would laugh, a sound the river had been waiting years to hear. As spring melted into summer, the land bloomed brighter than it had in a decade. The townsfolk noticed the change. They said the Boone farm looked alive again, fences mended, windows shining, laughter drifting down from the porch some evenings when Clara came by with supper. She and Elias didn't speak much of love. They didn't need to. It grew in small things, in the quiet company, in the way she'd pour him coffee before he asked, in how she'd scratch behind Scout's ears and call him the hero of the plains. Sometimes at dusk, she'd stay to watch the sunset, the three of them sitting side by side, woman, man, and dog, as the sky burned itself into gold and purple. One evening, as they watched the sun sink low, Elias said softly, "Funny thing about storms." Clara looked at him, her eyes gentle. "What's that? They break what's weak, but they show you what's strong. Never knew I had much left in me till one came knocking." She smiled faintly. "You always had it. Just needed a reason to look." Scout lifted his head, barked once into the dying light, and they both laughed. The wind carried the sound far, out across the open land, where it mingled with the hum of the earth itself, a hymn of survival, soft and endless. But peace in the Wild West is never a thing that lasts without reminder. One late night, a wagon came rumbling down the road, an old man at the reins, lantern swinging. Elias stepped out to greet him, the rifle still kept by the door, though he rarely needed it now. The traveler said he'd come from the mining towns, that the stranger, the one who claimed the dog, had been found weeks ago, dead in a canyon. His horse had returned alone. "Guess he was running from something," the traveler said, "or maybe toward it." Elias nodded, thanked him, offered water, then watched as the wagon rolled away into the dust. He turned to Scout, who sat waiting by the steps, tail thumping slow. "Looks like you can rest easy now," he said. The dog tilted his head, eyes catching the starlight like wet amber. Elias looked up. The night sky was endless, stars scattered like salt across black velvet. He thought of all the souls lost to that sky, and how somehow the ones who matter never truly leave. They just come back in different forms, sometimes as a song, sometimes as a scent on the wind, and sometimes as a stray with eyes full of memory. He sat down on the steps, and Scout rested his head against his knee. The air was cool, the crickets singing their small, honest songs. "I used to think I was done," Elias murmured. "Just a man waiting for the world to forget his name. But you came along, and you made me remember. Maybe life ain't about what we lose. Maybe it's about what still finds us." Scout gave a low, contented sigh, as if in agreement. The years rolled on. Seasons turned. The Boone farm became a place folks talked about, not for its size or wealth, but for its kindness. Travelers passing through always found a meal, a story, and the sight of a big, loyal dog sleeping by the porch. Elias grew older, slower, but lighter somehow. Clara stayed close, her laughter warming the house like a lamp that never went out. And when the day finally came, many years later, when the old man sat on that porch for the last time, the sun dipping low behind the wheat, Scout was still there beside him. His muzzle gray, his eyes soft with years. The air that evening was quiet, still kind. The sky turned the color of honey and smoke. Elias reached down, ran his hand along the dog's fur, and whispered, "We made it home, didn't we, boy?" Scout wagged his tail once, a slow, steady rhythm. And then the wind came, that same gentle wind that once carried a cry across the plains. Only now it carried peace. By morning, the porch was empty, save for 2 chairs and a dog lying close to where the old man had sat. But if you listened closely, the breeze that passed through the wheat still sounded like their laughter, soft, unbroken, eternal. The story of Elias Boone and the abandoned dog lived on in quiet whispers, passed from one generation to the next. Some said the dog had been heaven sent, others that it was just luck and timing. But those who'd seen them together knew better. They knew love, when it's true, doesn't need an explanation. It just finds its way home. And now, as the camera of your heart pulls back, the farmhouse shrinking against a golden field under a boundless sky, let the story settle like warm dust on your soul. Because maybe somewhere, out there beyond time and wind, an old man and his faithful dog are still walking that riverbank, side by side, in a world made entirely of peace. And if this story found you tonight, maybe it's your reminder too, that no matter how lost, broken, or abandoned we become, love still finds a road back to us. So if this tale touched you, friend, take a quiet moment. Leave your thoughts below. Tell us where in this wild, wide world you're watching from. And remember, out here in the wild west of the heart, every soul deserves to find its way home.